Roger, thanks for joining me today. Super appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really nice to meet you. I've enjoyed thumbing through your new book, A New Way to Think. I've got it right in front of me, so you can
Excellent.
thank your team for sending that to me.
Excellent.
Great stuff. I'm anxious to get into it. I'm a little bit of a aficionado around leadership and mostly personal leadership, but obviously
Yes.
that kind of spills into organizational leadership.
Yep.
Because there's such an overlap. And my company does leadership development and team building. So I have, I don't consider myself a scholar in the sense that you are, but I have a lot of familiarity. So I love talking about it, even though my podcast tends to veer toward motivation and mental toughness. This is a passion of mine. So I'm super
Yeah.
excited to kind of
No,
dig
no,
into it.
good. Well,
Yeah.
in a manner of speaking, it is. I mean, it is a leadership book.
Right.
It's a you have a chance to own your models. Are you
Right.
going to or not? Right. I suspect that's one message in various forms that you send in your leadership book.
100%, and how
Yep.
mental models can trap us or free us, and
Yep.
how to deconstruct models that aren't working and reconstruct them. I usually talk about that in the context of, just what's working in life in general, but it's
Yes.
totally relevant in business. So before we kind of get into some of the cool principles that you're teaching and have uncovered in the last few years, what were some of the models that framed how you shaped your life? I saw you were Canadian, and then you went to Harvard undergrad and MBA, so that shaped you in certain ways. And so
Yes.
let's talk about kind of the formation of Roger Martin, and then we'll kind of get into what deconstructed that and where you're heading.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I think I am as most people are, a product of their environment to a great extent. Mine, growing up, first 18 years of my life was in a very small town.
Mm.
Uh, when I was a small boy, it was about 50 people.
Oh wow, you beat me. I was in upstate New York, 375.
Yeah, it's
So
that big now. So
is it?
Wallenstein is a metropolis. It maybe is even 400 or 500 now. But
Woo,
yeah,
wow,
yeah, that's big time.
that's big time.
But it was 50, and probably by the time I left, it was maybe 100. Um, so and I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in a little town. But my father, when I was two, started an entrepreneurial venture, which is manufacturing animal feed for the farmers. So I sort of was ensconced in that world,
Hmm.
um, and I think what shaped my models were really coming from a small town and my parents.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
dad, entrepreneur, but he always had he not educated, so high school educated,
Hmm.
became an entrepreneur after high school, right? And um, but he always had a very, what if you went to MIT, you'd be call it a system dynamics view of the world. This is connected to this, is connected to this, is connected to
Right.
this. And I would
Right.
always ask him questions, right? I'd say, Dad, you are like super cheap. You don't spend on anything at the feed mill. You don't even have your own office because you say, well, there's always somebody out. I can just sit in their office. So the owner, the 100% owner of the company,
Right.
thinks other people should have offices and not him. So you're terribly cheap, but you have sort of the Taj Mahal of truck washing facilities out back behind the mill.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
I just, like, I don't get it. Why are you spending, and you wash the trucks like
Hmm.
multiple times a day sometimes when they're like perfectly fine. Like, why do they need to be washed? And he always would start, well, Roger, the farmers, their animals are really sensitive. If they miss a feeding, especially chickens, which was our biggest business, they're off their growth trajectory for life.
Really?
Right,
Oh
they're
wow.
relatively short
Right.
lives. And so the last thing a farmer wants to hear is a call from Wallenstein Feed and Supply Limited saying our truck broke down, we'll be there tomorrow.
Hmm.
If those trucks are pristine and beautiful looking coming down the farm lane to the barn, they're just not going to think about that. They're going to say Wallenstein takes care of its trucks. Wallenstein will always deliver.
Right.
And I'm sort of thinking, I after I graduated from Harvard Business School and went out into the world, some 30 or 40 years after, or 30 years after this, kind of I learned about signals of value, right?
Right.
Things
Right.
that aren't of actual direct value, but signal to you that the value is there,
Yeah, it's a
right?
form of
So,
perception management, right? But it's
yeah,
got to be followed up with real
with action.
delivery, with
Well, you
action,
got to
right? Yeah,
deliver, and he
right.
and he
And he
delivered.
did.
But
Wow.
he was giving me these sort of sophisticated thoughts just from his well, Roger, this is the way it is, and that happened numerous times. Hey, Dad, why do we have a price list that our salespeople hand out to the farmer at the start of the sales call, and we never ever ever deviate from the price list?
Right.
Well, Roger, if the farmer thinks that prices are for negotiation, the entire sales call will be a price negotiation.
Right.
If instead they can feel confident that not another farmer on the face of the planet is going to get a better price than the one that's printed on the list that he's given, our salesperson can spend the entire sales call talking about the quality of our feed and the
Hmm.
service and all of that, and that's what I want them to talk about. So
That's
again,
fascinating.
sort of a and then I say, but Dad, what if a competitor undercuts us at that farmer? Don't you want to fight that back? Well, no, Roger. If they're undercutting us, if we've got good cost position, they're undercutting us at a given farmer. That's not who we should be winning. We
Hmm.
should figure out who they're overpricing and go win them. So
Hmm.
if you see what I mean, it was system dynamics, and so trying to always think in a more sophisticated way about how the world works before you make decisions.
Yeah,
That
I love
was
that.
that
It
was from
must it
dad.
must have been a lot of fun, at Harvard and afterwards to kind of look backward and be like, oh wow, look at that. My
Yeah.
dad was pretty wise, and that was system
Yes.
dynamics, and that was price inelasticity, and that was price signaling. You know what I mean?
Yes. All of that stuff. I mean, unfortunately, it felt a little bit different, to be honest. And I shouldn't be so mean about it, but I I I had quite a bit of I liked Harvard College. I learned a
Right.
lot there. Harvard Business School. I was like, I mean,
Interesting.
gee, this is not very sophisticated. I've heard more sophisticated thinking at my
Right.
little breakfast nook table that we
Do you think that
ate at
because
all
they're
the time.
just too far removed, the academia is just too far removed from the reality of what's going on, or they thought that their
Well,
ideas
it's
were above the average business person?
E- n- I think it is. I think a lot of it is reductionism, right?
Yes. Yes.
So that the business world, business education world has embraced reductionism.
Yeah.
Teach finance, think about
Yep.
all else being equal, and that was impossible for my dad,
Hmm.
and not in his character.
Yeah. I agree
But
with
I,
this.
I
And it's
should
like,
I should say a quick. I don't want to go on too much, but
no,
on
no.
my mother, because it was the opposite. So Dad, 100% always answered my questions. Mom never would. I'd
She would
say,
make you figure it out yourself.
yeah.
That's cool.
Now she would help me along, but like I would say, well, why was Aunt Delphine mad at Fred? I don't know. Why do you think so, Roger? And then I would come up with well, maybe it's this. She said, well, how would you know that? Have you thought about this? And right. And so,
Yeah.
literally, I got one who gave me these very sophisticated, complicated kind of answers, the high school educated one,
Right.
and the more educated one would always do
Yes.
well, what do you
That's cool.
think?
So,
What
so
do
your
you think?
dad was the practical business guy and taught you
Yeah.
that. Your mom was the philosopher, taught you Socratic method and
Yes.
how to
Yeah.
the art of inquiry. That was
Yes.
beautiful.
So I
That's
think
cool.
both of those, though, made me interested in models. I didn't know it at the
Hmm.
time that that's what I was interested in, but I was interested in models, and I was interested in how you think about what you think. It wasn't
Hmm.
just get an answer. It was ask the question, how should I think about this? What kind
Yeah.
of a problem is this?
Right. What's coming to me now, which is interesting, is there's kind of like this meta model or meta narrative that you called reductionism that is permeated and still does our all academic institutions, but particularly scientific and business schools would like to think that they're the science of management, and they're
Yes.
veering off into leadership, which is more of an art. So that's cool.
Yeah.
But I had a similar experience. I went to NYU Stern School of Business,
Oh,
85
okay.
to 89.
Yeah.
Then I joined the Navy, so I put that to good use. Not,
Yes.
but it's a whole different story.
You and my friend A.G. Lafley. He was the Navy
Yeah,
too.
there you go. Yeah. And anyways, I came back into business after getting off active duty to start a microbrewery, a brewing company,
Mm.
fourth one here in San Diego.
Yes.
And there wasn't a lick of the MBA which was useful except the three letters on a piece of paper which helped me raise $1.5 million and get
Yes.
a bank
Yes.
loan.
Yes.
So it wasn't a waste of time or money, but the concepts weren't very useful.
Yeah.
And
It teaches you, interestingly too, though, it teaches you a language system,
true that. Yeah.
that other. So that's how you got the money,
That's how I got the
in my
money because I
view.
spoke the
It was three
language.
letters, and then you could say term sheet
That's right.
and
Yeah.
financing and debt
I
and
could say all
equity.
that.
And
Yeah.
if you wouldn't have had your business education, you would have spoken a language system that they would say, that's
I
a
would have
low
spoken
form of
Navy
language.
SEAL, and
Yes.
and that would have been intriguing to them. They would have wanted to have a beer with me, but they probably would have given me their money.
No, no, that is true. But
But today, like and this is relating to your book, like it's very clear that science of management has missed the forest for the trees. Just like
mhm.
economics doesn't work anymore, and we keep trying the same things, expecting different results, and yet we just
Yes,
make things worse.
macro is a
Which,
faux science.
yeah, it is,
Like
and so
micro is something real.
it
Like
still works, right? But
yeah, micro works where the curves cross for an individual market, where the curves cross for a
yeah,
company in that market.
I
That's
agree
all
with that.
right. But then a bunch of people said, why don't we blow this up using unbelievably heroic assumptions to the economy as a whole? And I hate to say it, it's just a faux science.
I do
I
agree. Yeah,
I do not, even the most accomplished macroeconomist. If I had a bet, the proverbial mortgage, if somebody said, you've got to either bet $1 million on the 10 top macroeconomists making some forecast and 10 people I picked out of the New York City phone book,
yeah,
I'd do the New York City phone
the
book.
phone
I'm
book.
afraid,
You
and
probably
that's
have a
that's not
better
very nice, but
statistical
it's true.
chance. I think their batting record is probably about on par with a 300, which is good
Yes,
in baseball, but probably not good in
I don't think they
entertainment.
make the Mendoza line, my friend.
Well, anyways, yeah. So things are, there's it's like the difference between complicated and complex, right?
Hmm.
In management science, which came out of the military, worked when things were complicated and you could sort of see a cause and effect relationship or some
Yes.
linearity. And where we're at now is we've blown past that,
Yep.
and we're in a
Yep.
very complex world. And you make the case in your book, a new way to think, that we actually have to throw out the old models and reconstruct a new model that's based upon, let's start and look at the forest and the complexity of things, and then kind of work from there, right? So we have to
Yes.
flip our models, and that changes everything. It changes the way you look at your customer, the way you look at strategy, culture. I think it's fascinating, because once you get trained and your brain starts to like get really comfortable with certain way and certain expectations, it's not easy to change your behavior, let alone the behavior of an entire organization.
I think that's true. I think that's true. And there are little things that I would say you can help yourself by doing, right? If you ever catch anybody or yourself saying all else being equal, blah blah blah, right?
Right.
A little red flag ching, should go up in your head that says, why don't I just spend 5 minutes on what the implication would be if all those other things aren't equal? And
Right.
maybe I'll say, oh, that's fine. That's fine. That doesn't bug me much. But you may well end up, and I would argue more often end up saying, oh my God, this other thing that isn't equal and isn't
Mm-hmm.
included in my little formula is going to kill me. And
Yeah.
we'd be better off that way. And the same, I say, there's that chapter on data, kind of all data is
Mm-hmm.
from the past. So whenever we analyze the past, we are assuming that the
Sticking
future
ourselves
will
there.
be will be a direct extrapolation of the past,
Right.
right? And so I just say, well, anytime you you pick up an analysis, okay, here's an analysis and it says X, you have to ask yourself the question, am I willing to assume the future will be identical to the past? And if the
Yeah.
answer is yes, then I
Yeah.
will make whatever decision that piece
Right.
of
And good
paper or
and
that
good luck.
analysis says.
Right.
But if I'm sort of like, whoa, wait a minute, like in the world of business in general, in my industry in specific, it keeps changing, then I
Right.
will take it with a grain of salt. So you need those little questions that, to try and drive you into a more productive
Well,
territory.
I love that because what those sayings are mental models or
Yes,
props for mental models.
yes,
So you can look at that saying like all else being equal and flip that and say, well, let's assume that nothing is ever equal anymore, right?
yes,
And
yes,
everything's flipped, right? So now we've got that takes a leg out of the stool of that old model, and then you have to like, oh,
yes.
okay, so
And
now
last
what?
time I checked, when you do that, it falls over.
It falls over, right? I'm in my doctoral program finishing something I started back in 2000 in leadership, and then I was recalled to go to a war, in Iraq, no small thing,
Oh my
and
goodness.
so I
You
didn't finish
survived.
it.
Good for you, my friend.
Yeah, I did, and when I was over there, I decided that I wanted to teach leaders in a real setting, meaning
Yep.
like real visceral, do this, do that, and growth, as opposed to like an academic setting. So I didn't finish, and that kind of stuck with me because Mark Divine, one of my mental models is I'm not a quitter. Divines aren't
Yes.
quitters, right? And
Excellent.
so here I am at 58, back in my doctoral program. But my global leadership and change professor said that we've left behind the information age, and we're now in the age of the conceptual age.
Hmm.
We also talked about the exponential age, which is more about the speed of technological adaptation and change. But what he was referring to is that the most important skill for leaders or for organizations is creation,
Yes.
creating something new, creating new concepts, new ideas, new ways of behavior, new cultural models, out of something that really didn't exist before, or
Yes.
evolving them. But
No, I would agree. And Aristotle, the greatest scientist of all time, who invented science 2,500 years ago, would agree. Right? He said there's two parts of the world. There's a part of the world where things cannot be other than they are, and that's like if I have this pen in my hand and
yeah,
I let
chair is a
go of it.
chair. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but if I have a pen in my hand and I let go of it, it's going to fall. It did last week. Like next week, 100 years from now, in Fort Lauderdale and San
right.
Diego, it'll fall. And he said, in that part of the world, the job of human beings is to understand the cause of the effects we see, so you can kind
Hmm.
of optimize to that, and like you
Right.
can you can
And that's
end
the
up.
scientific process, right?
That's
Yeah,
the scientific method, right? That's what he created.
right.
But he said there's another part of the world, and it's the part of the world where things can be other than they are. Like, this part of the world. In 1999, there were exactly zero of these.
Right.
Last time I checked, there were 4.4 billion of them, smartphones. That's the part of the world where things can be other than they are. And there he said something quite different. He said, one, he said, don't use my scientific method, A. B, your job as a human in that part of the world is to be the cause of the effect you want to see.
Mm,
And the technique you need to use, rather than gathering data and analyzing a sample of data, is to imagine possibilities and choose the one for which the most compelling argument can be made.
I love
Right?
that. Steve Jobs is like screaming at us right now, like, "Yes, I said that.
Yes, yes. No,
think
yeah,
think
think of what
differently."
he did. Think of what he did his entire career, one time after the next. He imagined a
Mhm.
possibility, and then he compellingly argued to both himself and everybody else for it, and became, the probably the most important CEO of his era as a CEO. But the
Mhm.
interesting thing is, most people would have sort of considered him sort of a way out there kind of wacko guy. Aristotle would have characterized him as being incredibly rigorous, right?
Right.
But the form of rigor in that part of the world is different, and it involves imagination. So I agree. I like, and unfortunately, business school education is
Mhm.
not helping people develop that capability. They're helping them
Right.
figure out how to analyze everything to death, but
Right.
not imagining things. That's why I
How,
like design education,
yeah, I was just
right?
going to ask. So, what's the answer to that? Like, how do
Yeah.
we train future leaders to be creative and insightful and figured things out new,
One
not
place
looking
is
for
design
sure.
school, right? I
Design school.
actually was at a dinner table with Joe Gebbia, who I had never met before, the co-founder of Airbnb,
Hmm.
RISD graduate, Rhode Island School of Design, as an
Hmm.
undergrad, like not a master's in undergrad in engineering or something. He was an undergrad in design, and I was curious. I just said, Joe, what would you say, if anything, was important that you learned at RISD that helped you found and grow Airbnb? And he was so fast and clear on the answer. He said, well, for the entire time I was there, all they did is over and over asked us to imagine new possibilities, right?
Hmm.
We got
Yeah.
one after the next. And I came out of that with a way of imagining possibilities, practice in imagining possibilities. It was just like, psh, and it was clear.
Boom.
He didn't think
Yeah.
much about it. I don't think he knew who I was and what I was. When I asked him the question, he asked me later, who are you? Kind of like, what do you do? So he wasn't trying to suck up to me, which his answer sort of did, right? Because he didn't know what. But that education, you're constantly trying to create new things for
Right.
4 years, instead of you're trying to analyze what exists for
Right.
2 years or 4 years in a business undergrad. So
Makes me want to go back to school and do
yeah.
design school. Right. That's
The,
amazing. I
the
agree with
problem
that.
is it's tiny. Like it's
Yeah.
hard to figure out exactly how many design degrees are given out a year, but I think it's something in the 15 to 20,000.
That's an
And
opportunity for business
yeah,
schools to reinvent themselves, right?
yes, it is. But you know how many business degrees are given out a year?
I
Like
don't
half
know.
a million.
100. Oh, I was going
Half
to
a
say
million.
100,000. 500,000. Wow.
Yeah, because there's like 175, 80,000 at last I checked MBAs, but they're way more,
Yeah.
over 300,000 undergrads. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's
And these are
gigantic.
all individuals learning to think for the old models
Yeah,
still.
to a
What
great
would you
extent. Yeah,
what do you think the future of work is? What does it look like? And I submit that future is on us, pretty
yeah.
damn quickly, if not already.
Well, one of the things I think is going to characterize it is that we're going to recognize that most business work is project based.
I know I
So
saw that. I'm really interested in how would
yeah,
you organize for that?
yeah. Well, I mean, there's big companies that organize that way. I mean,
Yeah,
Accenture, Deloitte, they're $50 billion companies organized by project.
that's
You put
true.
together a
Good
project
point.
team to do a project. When the project's over, it disassembles and you and
In
you
a
you
way,
begin.
now that you say that, the SEAL teams we were organized that way.
Oh,
I mean,
yes, seals are
being mission focused was being project focused, and
absolutely.
our rank really was secondary. That
Yes.
that was a job, but it was more of a title than a job.
Yes. But it also sort of specified what position you could take in a project. So
True.
there would be a
Right.
leader who would say, "Oh, when we have this project called Go Rescue those
Right.
Americans, kind of who are being held captive over there," you'd say, "Well,
Hmm.
who could lead that? Oh,
Hmm.
that person. Now let's create a team.
Yeah.
They'll go train for it, and then they'll go do it, and then it's over. It's done. It
Right.
never happens again. Those Americans are not going to be rescued from that place at that time ever
Hmm.
again.
Hmm.
It's gone. As opposed to if you were in an old-fashioned factory, you'd be on the assembly line, the third station on the assembly line, doing the
Hmm.
same thing like over and over every day, every week, every month, every
Yeah.
year. So we imported into these knowledge based jobs, which seals is.
Hmm.
It's a knowledge based. You're knowledge workers. You
That's
happen
right.
to have a whole lot of physical aspects that you've got to
Hmm.
do really well, but you're knowledge workers. You're
Hmm.
problem solvers, real time problem
Hmm.
solvers, planners, all of that kind of
Right.
stuff. We just ported over from that world, this sort of flat job notion, when
Hmm.
it just kind of isn't. I also
Hmm.
love, I love what the elite military ingrains in people. I think, but you can
Hmm.
tell me, like, you're the expert, you lived it, but there isn't this rigid distinction between strategy and execution,
That's right.
right? Because SEAL teams, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, know that all sorts of stuff is going to happen. I could use
Right.
a worse word for it. Stuff is going to happen when you head out on your
That's right.
mission, and you are going to have to figure stuff out in
That's
real
right.
time or die, right? And
Yep.
whoever you're trying to rescue,
Right.
or whoever you're trying to get onto the beach is going to die too. And so there isn't this sort of like, well, we do all the clever stuff here when we set the mission of your
That's right.
team, and you're
Yeah.
just
You're,
executing.
you're absolutely right. And there's a few nuances which are really fun, and I won't go deep into this, but the planners are the executors,
Yes.
right? And so they recognize that no plan survives contact with reality or the
Yeah.
enemy in our case. And so we just create a good enough plan that gets us out the door so we can learn on the fly. And that becomes the OODA loop, which became popular in business circles as well.
Yes. John Boyd. John
John
Boyd.
Boyd, yeah. So you observe
Brilliant
what's
man.
happening, you orient, you change, you learn from it, you make another decision, and you fail your way toward victory.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
by just overcoming one obstacle after another, after another, and after another. That's and that some of my speeches and stuff, I'd say that VUCA world is now on the business world, right? And so those
Yes.
skills are very valuable.
But seriously, what would have you said as a SEAL team member if your SEAL team leader just said, "Well, I've got the plan, and you boys are just executing now," right? You'd have said, "I'm not
We
doing
would have
this,"
laughed at
right?
them. Well,
Yeah.
there's some great fun stories, like because the SEALs were for a very long time somewhat unique in this regard, and also the tier one units. But a lot of the units that came out of the army, which was much more centralized, they didn't have this built into their culture. So a great example
Interesting.
is that like as I had one of a friend tell me that they were on a pretty important op, and the Rangers had one job, which was to kind of provide protective flanking security and
Yep.
reactionary force, and the SEALs were going to get the bad guy.
Yep.
And so the Ranger leader and the SEAL commander, in this case, the SEAL commander wasn't on the floor because he wanted to give his second, the experience. And so SEAL commander is just there quietly watching his team. And the Ranger guy's going, go left, go right, do this, do that.
Oh,
And he
interesting.
looks over the SEAL and goes, why aren't you leading?
Oh,
And he says, the SEAL said, I
fascinating.
am leading.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, cha-ching.
Cha-ching. Isn't that's kind of speaks to what we're talking about, the
Yes.
command and
Yeah.
control versus allow the guys closest to the action to figure it out because they've got the best information. And I think you
Exactly.
make this point in your book about,
Yes.
you know, trying to support every level of the whatever the bureaucracy is, because you're always going to have that, no matter how
Yes.
flat an organization is there to support the level below it. And
Yes.
the closer you can get everyone to supporting the guy on the ground or the woman on the ground who's dealing with the customer,
Yes.
then the
Yep.
more execution
Absolutely.
excellence you're going to have.
And if they can't, right, get rid of them. Right? If a layer is not clearly helping the people at the coal face, or for you guys, the guys on the ground on the mission, then get rid of them because all they're doing is slowing you down, adding costs,
Yeah,
inflexibility. It can't just be neutral. It's got to be positive. You're
positive. Yeah,
positively helping them, and who is the decision maker on whether it's helpful or not? I would say
yeah.
it's the SEAL team on the ground.
It's got to be on the ground, right? And if
Yeah,
you kind of
right.
undercut them or
You're
second
the
guess them, it's
judge. You're the judge of, was that thing. If I got some, let's just say for sake of argument, I got some news in my headphone. If that was sort of bureaucratic, could you please check in now and give a report? And you're being fired at or whatever. Then that's useless
yeah,
bureaucracy. If it's, hey, we got some intel from the helos, then and
mhm.
the bad guys are a little placed differently than we thought, then you're saying, oh, hooray,
Yeah.
they're useful, right? It's kind of
This
as
is,
simple as
it
simple as that.
sounds simple, but it's the exact opposite of how most big organizations were either evolved or were designed. And I
Yes.
think of like the worst examples, of course, are the bureaucratic organizations of a government,
Yes.
which everything is designed for information to flow uphill.
Yes.
And almost to the extent where if they're busy creating a report or something and you're the customer, like,
Yeah.
hello,
Too
chirp,
bad.
chirp, too
Yeah.
bad, right?
Yeah, yeah. Too bad for you. You know, you can wait. You can wait till we've got it done. And
That's
that's why
right.
I used as my example. You're in the middle of the fight, and they're asking you to report in so they can fill in some box that says, you know, here's how far the SEALs got by this point in time, and it's going to get you killed, right?
Right.
That that happens all that, as you know, that happens all the time
Right.
in business, and it's I think it's responsible for that, and that you're just executing and you're following our orders and whatever is responsible for these incredibly low engagement kind of rates, right?
Right.
Whenever
Right.
Pew does their engagement survey, it's like incredibly low, um,
Right.
and
We
there's a
know
there's a reason.
we know from Cotter and other, immunity to change type um, information that comes. I mean, a lot of it out of Harvard, right? I think
Yeah,
Cotter was a Harvard guy,
Carter
and
Carter was great. He's a very nice man
yeah,
too.
that most change efforts are failed. Change is very hard for organizations. So
Yes.
how do we take an organization or a whole culture of organizations or society, I guess is a better word, that have been built for process to transform them to be built for projects and to be radically focused on the customer instead of the organization's uh, hierarchical informational
Yeah.
needs.
Well, the answer, and this will come as a shocker to you, of course, is leadership, right? So,
Right.
but it does play a big role. But what my my view on it is you can get there with baby steps, right?
Hmm.
You do not have to transform in a day and make grand pronouncements about how we're going to change everything. You got to start walking in the right direction, and in doing so build momentum.
Hmm.
And I had this experience of being a business school dean for 15 years, and I went into a business school that had the previous dean had to be fired because there's a big scandal that
Hmm.
rocked the school and created factions, and it was had a deficit, and it was called the School of Mismanagement in the newspapers rather than the School of
Oh
Management.
man.
Yeah, so sort of all bad. And I wanted to make it, a globally consequential business school, which lots of people laughed at me and said,
Hmm.
just make it a decent Southern Ontario business school and we'll be happy. But I said, no, 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 we want to be that. But I had an explicit plan, which is, which is, I want there to be a total transformation of the school
Hmm.
from embattled, crappy, second rate to globally consequential, where people are working together happily and being enormously productive. Um, but, and so that's start to finish.
Hmm.
But each year, I want to make sure we don't change so much that along the way anybody starts jumping out of buildings and gonna screaming, have hair on
Hmm.
fire, saying you're changing everything and I don't know what
Hmm.
to do.
Hmm.
That was
Right.
my explicit plan, and we did it, and all the external kind of validation. At the end of it, I was named Global Business School Dean of the Year and I considered
Hmm.
transformational. Blah 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 blah. But it was principled, directioned baby steps
Right. Yeah. Micro goals, what we
along the
said
way.
in the seals. You know,
Yeah.
eat the elephant one
Oh,
bite at a
that's what
time.
you call them, micro
We
goals.
got them micro goals. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
But
I
you
didn't
got to
know
know
that
where you're going to go,
terminology,
right?
but
You have
that's
to know you're eating an elephant.
yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to know what the end vision is, and that's
Yeah.
where the leader comes in to set the
and
vision
that
up.
and that was mine. So I didn't declare, oh, there's going to be this massive culture change and everything you do is going to change, and the like. I just encouraged more of the behavior I liked. I kind of tried to discourage the behavior that was counterproductive. um, by the end of the time, there had been quite a change in the senior management team, but there was
Hmm.
never sort of a night of the long knives where I had to sack
Hmm.
everybody and the like. And lots of people who would have never imagined that they would want to be in a business school run by me, um, ended up being, kind of my best colleagues.
Hmm.
And so if you create massive confrontation about change up front, in my view, good luck to you,
Right.
right? If instead, and you show you you give a positive goal, a vivid positive goal, and then start down that path, my view is, oh, it was always that I, in some sense, had to work the hardest.
Hmm.
But if you want to make something good happen, you're gonna have to work hard.
Work
I
hard.
wasn't gonna make other people work harder than me, take more risks than me. I always wanted to
Right.
take the biggest risks and work the hardest.
Right.
Uh, and so many uh, people came along, and you also don't create sides. I mean, at
Right.
the first faculty council, when I sort of gave my vision of where I wanted us to go, uh, you know, I got told by a very, very senior professor, this is a disaster. This is going to be terrible. This is all wrong. Da, 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 da. Bless him. 5 years later, he came to my office and just said, you probably think I want to brush this under the rug, but I will remind you, this is what I said at that faculty council meeting. I just want to come to say I was wrong. I
Good for
was
him.
wrong.
Wow.
Yeah, good for him. Like, boy, did
Hmm.
I, have a lot of respect for him. He explained. He said, "Here's why I thought it would not work.
Hmm.
You showed that it worked, and I was not right about these things.
Hmm.
And thank you
Hmm.
for turning around our school, because he'd been there already 25-ish years probably, and
Yeah. So
was
his mental models weren't didn't allow your model to be kind of accessible or
yes.
available
Yeah,
to
he
him.
had to sort of see it in action
Right.
for and see the results to come around
Yeah.
to it. And that's one of the things I think often leaders attempt to win big, complicated conceptual battles,
Right.
right?
And
And
not everyone
watch
has a capacity to see that kind of way. That's why they're not
exactly,
leaders or they're not in your role.
exactly,
They have
exactly.
to learn through experience
Yes, yeah.
incrementally.
Um,
Well, you said something around in this conversation that made me think that a lot of people, one of the reasons that they could fail or are challenged with change efforts is they try to start with the structure without realizing that culture, eats structure for lunch, which
yes,
is a deviation of culture eats strategy for lunch.
yes,
As opposed to, you said, focusing on behaviors, which ultimately defines culture, right?
yes, yes. No, that's right. I, I have come to the conclusion that if you believe a structural change, sort of like we're going to flatten the organization, or we're
Right,
going to
right,
empower, or we're going to have these people report to those people instead of those people, those people, you're going to be sorely disappointed. Right?
right.
It's just not going to work.
Because you're going to
What?
get the same behavior with just a different structure,
Yeah, yeah.
or you're going
And
to get
so
chaos,
yes, oh yes, or both.
or both.
So yeah, so really focusing on how people work together and interact, and the most powerful tool a leader has in his or her toolkit is their own behavior.
Hmm.
Because if it's do as I say, not as I do, good luck. Good luck to you. That's like smoking like a chimney, and telling your kids smoking is bad for you. You shouldn't smoke.
I have to admit that was my father's favorite saying. He meant it too.
Yes.
He wasn't exactly the positive role model that your father was, but that's a whole different
Okay.
story. Yeah, that's a different story for a different
That's
day.
another story entirely. So and what people tend to push back on me with that, which is say, God, Roger, that's going to be slow slogging. So you, as
Mhm.
a leader, want to change your behavior, and it's going to take forever. You'd be surprised. Like, Kremlin watching does not only happen in Moscow.
Mhm. Mhm.
Everybody watches. If they have a
Mhm.
leader and they want to have any modicum of respect for them, they want to be more like that leader. That leader's more senior than they are,
Mhm.
and if they're doing this, they're aspiring to get more senior, and so they watch. And
Mhm.
a CEO, brand new CEO of a company I'm working with, um, I tried to impress. He needs to change the culture, and I just said, just just
Change
start
yourself.
doing just start doing things that you think are consistent with the culture, and don't do them alone. So he wanted to do. They're in fashion retailing, and so he wanted to go and see life in the stores. They have some own store and some wholesale. This was the wholesale accounts. How is our brands, being
Mm-hmm.
being sold in these
Mm-hmm.
stores, etc. And instead of historically, that would have been announced in advance. All the stores would have been prepped. They would have cleaned up everything and made everything absolutely perfect. So the CEO would have had a visit where everything was absolutely perfect. He said, it's going to be completely unannounced. Only
Mm-hmm.
the pilot knows what city we're going to. And he was going to do that. And I said, invite anybody who wants to come along to come along.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And he did. And a bunch took him up on it. A couple of people were like, I'm too busy. Kind of tells you something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm too busy. The CEO isn't too busy, but I'm too busy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then he could walk the stores and say, "Here's what's problematic as I see it. Here's stuff that's being done really well," and all the people traipsing around with me, be asking them questions about it and whatever, and was it enabled them to see how his mind worked and what he thought needed to happen for their brands to do better.
Mm.
That's going to
That's
have
neat.
a huge knock-on effect.
Right.
Every one of those 7 or 8 people is going to go back to their people with kind of messages and what we need to focus on and how we've got to operate
Mm-hmm.
and the like. So it's just it moves faster than you would
Right.
think.
And that was just one action, and
Yeah,
there could be 5 or 7 of those things kind of going on simultaneously.
absolutely. But in this
That's
case,
cool.
what I was pleased with myself for convincing him of is to invite the others along, because it was
Mm-hmm.
going to be his own personal fact finding. Said, no, no,
Yeah.
no,
Love that.
you'll spread it faster if you
Right.
do it together with a group
Well,
of
that's
executives.
similar to the idea of, like, again, back to my SEAL experience, which taught me more about leadership than business school and whatnot. But the planning is done by the entire team.
Yeah,
Again, this is also different than the more hierarchical army, where the planning is done by the officers and then they kind of hand the plan to the team.
yep.
The planning is done by the team,
I
and
did not know that.
yeah,
That's fantastic, right?
yeah.
I mean,
Because then everyone gets it. Everyone
yep,
is involved. The lowest, the most junior person has as much input as anyone else, because the best idea is the best idea.
yes,
Period. Doesn't matter where it comes from. And then the other thing that's cool about this is SEALs also understand the power of imagery. Because imagine if you had 14 or 16 guys heading out on a mission, they all had a different image in their head of what the mission parameters were, what victory looked like. You could get a very different outcome.
yes.
So we use a lot of video and pictures and imagery, and everyone's involved in that process. And then we visualize it and we rehearse it, so that everyone, we allow that massive fluidity on the ground for how to execute. It works because everyone's still got a very similar, clear vision of what the outcome is supposed to look like.
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
This is no, it is fascinating. I mean, I should study seals more. No, I should, because all of these things you say are just are like
They're
so
very
consistent.
relevant. They're very
Yeah,
relevant for
and very
leadership.
consistent with the sorts of the analogs of what I think about in the world of business.
Yeah,
I'm coming away from this conversation saying
yeah,
there's more kind of likeness and synergy than I might have known. I never thought,
yeah.
oh, they're completely different, but
Right.
I gotta admit, I did not
Well,
know
when
some of
most
these
people
things that
think
were.
of the military, they think of the old, military industrial complex type management systems.
Yep.
And then they hear about special ops and they're like, oh, yeah, they navigate, they work fast and they work well as teams. And those are all true.
Yeah.
But the question is why?
Yeah.
Why do they have that execution agility, and why do they deal well with uncertainty and complexity? It's because they've trained themselves to be very agile with their planning and their execution, and their cohesiveness as a unit is that once we get in the field, all ranks come off. It's like, okay, everyone is the same. Let's figure this out, because it's the
Yeah.
mission first, the teammate second, and then you third on the
Yeah.
list of priorities. So you're
And
saying,
lots of people would say, well, then there'll be chaos,
no,
right?
yeah, there's no
But it's the
controlled
opposite,
chaos.
right? Yeah, yes. I mean, but yeah, but it's sort of the opposite.
Right.
I mean, your environment is a
But
chaotic one,
you
but
get the results and they look pretty when they're delivered,
yeah,
but it's a sausage making process to get there. And it's
yes,
just that way in business, as you know. Like customer sees this beautiful product at the end, but man, there's times where you're like, this is a capital S show. You know what I mean?
yes.
To get there. That's been my experience. And it was maybe that's just me as a leader and my flaws.
No, 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 no. I buy that entirely. Yeah.
We got to wrap up here, and I want to respect your time. But how would you? So let's pan back out to the bigger mental model that you're trying to create or help leaders with. How would you define strategic planning for this conceptual age of exponential growth that we're in?
Well, I would say the model has to be you do need to make bold choices,
Mm-hmm.
but you do need to watch what happens and tweak and adjust.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you're going to do that is to be more explicit with yourself and your team about what we believe will happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, because of what we believe is true, we've made this set of choices.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go uh, do those choices, manifest those choices in our action, but then not be so foolish as to say, regardless of what happens, we're just going to keep charging ahead,
Right.
right? It's to say, if something that would have had to be true turns out not to be true, we don't just
Mm-hmm.
like plow through. We say, what way would we adjust for that? But
Mm-hmm.
if you didn't think in advance about the things that would have to be true, right, you don't know if something that happens is undermining of the model and the logic of the model or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you could see a SEAL team kind of analog of that.
Right.
If you didn't say, well, we're going to go in this direction because we think they're there, and they've got a gun a placement there, right? Then if the gun placement isn't where you thought it was, or the people aren't where you thought about it, you can say, whoa, 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 careful.
Mm-hmm.
We might be doing the wrong thing in the wrong place. But if you
Right.
didn't have any idea, you didn't make it explicit what those things you thought were going to happen, you wouldn't know how to adjust and
Mm-hmm.
if you should adjust. So you
That's
need
interesting. Yeah.
boldness. You need to be explicit about what you believe is behind your choices, then watch and adjust and
Right.
adjust and adjust that until such time, right? As you say, scrap, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are too many things that would have been true that are demonstrating themselves not to be true, that the logic has now collapsed under its own weight, and then maybe it's retreat and live to fight another day, or in real time come up with a different plan.
Right.
The only thing that I like, you know, not only thing, the thing I object to by far and away the most are the people who say it's a VUCA world, so just chill, don't make any choices until things become clear.
Oh, that's exactly opposite, in my opinion.
Right?
We have a saying: doubt is eliminated through action.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
it's got to be the best informed action that is the smallest arc to success in the moment or in this time period, right?
Yep.
That you can take so you can get immediate feedback and activate that OODA loop again. Right?
Absolutely. But if you just sit back and sort of wait for the VUCA to disappear,
It's
you
never
might
going to
be
happen.
waiting a century. Right? 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 So there is no choice but to act under in business under uncertainty, competition, and constraints. Right?
Right.
You're going to always have uncertainty, competition, and constraints.
Mm-hmm.
You got to act, and then you've got to learn from those actions
Mm-hmm.
to act even more intelligently and even more
Mm-hmm.
intelligently. And if you don't act, you will never learn a damn thing about being more intelligent.
I love it. That's awesome. And then the corollary to that is lead by example, which you
Hmm.
addressed, and recognize that it's all about the people. So the
Yep,
culture is gonna drive success, not the structure or the strategy.
you got it.
Awesome. This has been a delightful conversation, Roger. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I learned a ton, and it was fun talking about my SEAL philosophy and strategies. And if I can help you out there, I'm all game.
That's great. That's great. I mean, I may well take you up on it that the synergies were just greater than I might have even imagined, even though I
Yeah.
had sort of a positive kind of view of it. But thank you for taking the time. I always appreciate when folks take the time to read my book
Oh
and then
yeah.
have a conversation about it. So I'm
I
the most thankful one in this conversation.
Yeah, I try to do that because I know, gosh, I mean, everyone's time is valuable, and even though you're published, this is saying get out and promote the book. There's a lot of other things you could be doing right now.
You got it. This
Yeah,
is
so
fun.
great.
Thank you.
The New Way to Think is the book. Roger Martin, available. It's out, right? It's on the market.
Yep. It was
Okay,
out
so
May 3rd.
available
So
wherever you buy books. And is there a social media or a place that your
sure.
publicist or you like people to find you on
Yep.
online? Or
So Twitter at Roger L Martin. I write a Medium column every
great,
Monday. You can
love it.
find me there, or my website is www.rogerlmartin.com. If you don't put the L in, it'll go to a really nice man, a real estate agent in Houston, who spends half his life forwarding emails to me. So www.rogerlmartin.com.
He's got a better SEO than you.
Yes, no, he does. He does. I said we can fix this problem. Like you can sell me the thing, and he's like, "Oh, it's been a long time. I don't want to do that." So
Check. That's funny. All right. Thanks again, sir. We'll
you
talk to
are
you
most
soon.
welcome. You take care.